1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at soulpopped. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I'm John Brooks.
And I am Joey Lewandowski.
And I hope you caught our first episode with author Brian Raftery. But today we begin the project of discussing the many, many amazing movies of 1999. So let's talk about how this podcast is going to unfold. So rather than just going through each movie chronologically, we're going to unpack these movies in rounds of 9. The first round will cover what Joey and I consider to be the essential 1999 movies.
Well, to be fair, the first batch of essential. There's a lot of really good in case you didn't know, dear listener to the podcast about 1999 movies, there's a lot of good movies from 1999.
There are. So we have decided to create a list of 9 movies that are sort of the first, as Joey says, batch of essential movies. We're going to do a second round of essential movies in our second round of 9. When we say essential, though, I want to make sure we're not saying these are necessarily all the best movies or even the highest grossing movies. I think some of the criteria we used were like which ones have a kind of a lasting legacy, which ones were kind of revolutionary or definitive of the time. Anything else, Joey, that
No, I just also want to say that it's not necessarily our favorites. Some of my favorites are definitely in this season, but there are some other movies that I really love that I would say are my favorites from the year that we're not getting to this season. So it's not like these are our 9 favorites. I haven't even seen all 9 of these yet. So it's definitely a mixture of legacy and impact and import and all sorts of different metrics that don't really make sense, but also make perfect sense.
And if you disagree with us, feel free to express your disagreement. You can find us on 1999 The Podcast at Twitter, or you can find us on the old email at 1999@cageclub.me. Feel free to write us approving or angry emails. Tell us what you think as we go along. But I think in general, Joey, our first 9 movies are going to be somewhat uncontroversial in terms of how meaningful they are. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to then cover those 9 movies in chronological order according to their wide release date.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
So one of the tricky things about this is some of the movies we're going to cover in this podcast came out in other countries in earlier years. And some of them that we're not going to cover were still in the theaters in 1999. Generally speaking, what we're going to do is just focus on the movies that had some kind of wide release, or if it's an indie movie, then U.S. independent theatrical release in the year 1999. Maybe we will break those rules once or twice. We'll see. But that's sort of how we're going to try and arrange these movies in some order. So based on those criteria, that means that coming in at number 9,
at number 9? What are we saying? At number 9? Are we
number
counting
1
up?
Or number 9?
The first up. I don't know.
At number first in a list of 9.
The first movie we're covering, the episode title for this episode.
Tied for first through 9th place in our hearts. The first movie we're going to cover comes to us from March 31st of 1999. And that movie is none other than The Matrix. Well, if you've been living under a rock or in some other reality that was created by a evil machine thing, you might not know, I guess, that The Matrix was released on March 31st, 1999, written and directed by the Wachowskis, and starring Keanu Reeves, Laurence Fishburne, Hugo Weaving, Joe Pantoliano, the guy who tried to sell Obi-Wan death sticks in Attack of the Clones, and at the time, a relatively unknown actress named Carrie-Anne Moss. Correct me if I'm wrong, this was Carrie-Anne Moss's first real big thing, right? Because Memento was a little bit later.
Well,
That
so
was
the only things that
2000.
I know that she's been in other than Matrix properties are Memento and Red Planet, which I have not seen. But I think if you offered me $1,000,000, I don't think I could name confidently another Carrie-Anne Moss vehicle, and which is a shame because I really like her, obviously, from this movie, but I also really like her in Memento too. So I don't know why I don't know her from things, but
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess she must have been newer.
Yeah, this was kind of her breakthrough. And Joey, I know that you obviously have spent a lot of time talking about Keanu Reeves and his career. Am I also right in remembering that this was sort of a not necessarily like a renaissance movie for him, but his career was kind of in a bit of a slump, and this was kind of a Keanu reemergence following the success of the only film ever made, Speed.
So my co-host on Keanu Club, Mike Manzi, and I went through all of Keanu's movies several years ago, and Keanu started out because we're like, oh, he's got so many great movies. We love so many of his movies. And it took so long. Like there's some good stuff early, and then he's in high school for like 9 or 10 projects, and I really lost like the will to like keep doing the project. But we kept going. He's got good stuff in the 90s, but he definitely hits a lull after Speed, where he's Johnny Mnemonic, which kind of flops, Walk in the Clouds, which is not great, Chain Reaction, which is not great, Feeling Minnesota, which is not great, Last Time I Committed Suicide, not great, then The Devil's Advocate, which I love, but is maybe not objectively good, and then The Matrix after a 2-year hiatus. So he had done both comedy and action and some drama pretty well in the late 80s, early 90s, and then sort of struggles to find his footing kind of and find a project that really resonates with people, and then takes what, like 18 months to train for this movie, and then changes cinema.
The Matrix was a pretty massive success throughout its theatrical run. Internationally, it grossed almost $500 million, which in 1999 money is a lot adjusted for inflation. I guess that's like 4 monkey JPEGs. I don't know how money works anymore, but a lot of money, and really kind of in a surprising way. It was not expected to be one of the hugest draws that year, but it was sort of a surprise movie. In the U.S., it made $171,479,930 in its domestic run.
Thank you for being specific.
You bet. Making it the 5th highest grossing movie of that year domestically. The Matrix spent 3 weeks non-consecutively, which is interesting, at the #1 spot in the domestic box office. That was the week of April 2nd through the 8th, the 9th through the 15th, and the 23rd through the 29th. Do you know, by the way, or can you guess, and you probably won't if you don't know this, what movie took it off of the
Oh, I have no
box
idea.
office
There's
top
that
spot?
new like Wordle knockoff box office game,
Yeah.
and I am terrible at that. Like I have a pretty good sense of when things came out year wise, but time of year wise, I have no idea. Especially given the what will come up over and over again in this podcast, that I was 11 or 12 almost entirely, like the almost entire year I was 11. So I saw none of these in theaters. So I have no memory of like, oh, I saw that like before I graduated, or I saw that over the summer or whatever. Like I have no idea when anything happened.
Yeah, it's pretty uncommon that a movie loses #1
For
and then comes
sure.
back. It used to be a little bit more common. It really doesn't happen much anymore at all.
I mean, the only time it would happen now is if like there's a weekend where nothing happens and like they're like, oh
Right.
yeah, Spider-Man won with like $8 million or whatever, right? Like nobody saw it, but like whatever.
Yeah, so there is something that was going on in the days that it wasn't #1. I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, the one that took it over for that 1 week was the Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence vehicle Life, directed by the late great Ted Demme. And I say late great, I can't believe he died 20 years ago, which blows my mind. But that was actually the second best Eddie Murphy movie of that year. Was a pretty good year for Eddie Murphy movies, actually, when you think about it.
Are we doing Life? Because I don't know if I've heard of Life.
We will do Life
Okay.
eventually. It will make it
Are
into
we
one of our
doing
rounds in the first couple of years.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Are we doing every movie that hit #1?
That's I'm sure we will eventually.
Okay.
Yes, so Life will make it there. I definitely want to talk about the other Eddie Murphy movie of that year because that was one of my favorite movies ever. Certainly
Whoa.
one of my favorite comedies of all time. I won't say what it is at the moment. But yeah, life took over for a week and then dropped back down, and The Matrix came back. Now, interestingly, what happened in the interim was Columbine, and which was April the 20th of 1999. And I remember that very, very well. And certainly it didn't put people really in much of a movie-going mood. That particular massacre really affected the country. We have become sort of immune or numb to that now, which is super depressing. But Columbine was a very, very big cultural moment. And The Matrix went back to number one immediately afterwards. So from the week of the 23rd to the 29th. And it came back number one at $12 million, which is fairly low. The next week, it was number two at the box office with just under 9 million, and was replaced by a movie that most of us have now thankfully forgotten, Entrapment, which spent its only weekend at number one, opening at $20 million or so. But it went on to make a ton of money in its various releases and overseas. Critically, it did very well as well. It has a 73% rating on Metacritic. That's a pretty high number for movies in Metacritic. And an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's one major outlier, there always is with the major critics, and that's Peter Travers from Rolling Stone, who was very, very lukewarm about The Matrix. I would love to know what he thinks of it now, if he's changed his mind. But most of the critics overall were very enthusiastic, either in terms of it being sort of a fun movie or a genuinely great movie. Peter Travers just thought it was sort of overly heady and sort of boring. And I maybe kind of agreed with him at the time. Anyway, we'll talk more about that when we get into our conversation. Lastly, the number one single at the time that The Matrix came out was Cher's Believe.
Do you believe in Love After Love? Life After Love?
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's what the nation thought was a good song, and then was replaced by, honestly, one of my least favorite songs of all time. Though I love the group, was TLC's No Scrubs, which is obviously their worst song. And if you disagree, again, come at me. I'm willing to hear that. But yeah, I hate that song. So that sets the stage. Let's get to it. Joey, who's our guest for today's episode?
Our guest today is former punter for the NFL team, my Minnesota Vikings, and also author and Warcraft enthusiast, Chris Kluwe.
Great. Can't wait to talk to him. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with Chris Kluwe to talk about The Matrix.
A spy break? That's a Matrix joke.
Yeah, that's right.
Psst. Hey, you.
Want to get doomed?
I'm Tessa.
And I'm Nicole, and we have a spanking new podcast for your ear holes called Doom Generation.
Listen in as two foul-mouthed biddies have an always casual, often comedic...
What? I think we're funny.
...and sometimes chaotic conversation about the things that doomed us to be who we are today.
Take a trip with us down nostalgia lane, and we'll try not to veer off the road.
Available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Doom Generation Pod, and on Twitter at DoomGen Pod.
Later, Doomers!
Welcome back. We are here with our special guest, Chris Kluwe. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm great. So, Chris, I wanted you to join us for a couple of reasons. One, I know you're a big nerd, and The Matrix is a very big nerd landmark. So I'm interested to see what you have to say about it. And you've also dabbled in cyberpunk yourself, in your debut novel is sort of in that genre. And the other reason is that Joey is the biggest Vikings fan that I know. So I only know like 4, but Joey is definitely the biggest of them.
There you go.
So,
I'm just so honored to be talking to my favorite punter from my favorite football team. It's a blessing. I'm so excited.
I'll take sentences that no one has ever spoken for 800, Alex.
He's not actually making that up. That all that stuff is actually true.
Okay.
I can attest to the fact that he's He's not just saying that. So anyway, welcome. This is our I guess kind of our maiden voyage. We this is our second episode, but the first actual movie that we're talking about. So that's I just broke a bottle of champagne over my laptop. You guys couldn't see that, but christening the ship with this one. Is
the ship the Nebuchadnezzar? I will stop.
Let's talk about The Matrix. So we're going to start, we're going to go around the room, as it were. And I just wonder, I want everybody to sort of say when they first saw this movie and like what the experience of it was. I know, Chris, you and I are fairly close in age. I assume you saw it when it came out. So 1999, you're what, like 18, 19 years old at the time?
Yeah, I would have been either a junior or senior in high school.
So tell me about that experience. What was it like seeing The Matrix for the first time?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, my friends and I, my high school friends, like we were all huge nerds. Loved playing video games. Like we'd get together and have LAN parties. Back when you'd carry giant computer towers over to each other's houses, stay up till ungodly hours playing like Quake or Doom or whatever it happened to be. But yeah, we had heard this movie was coming out, and it looked really cool. Right. It looked like, okay, here's a sci-fi action movie that, this bullet time thing, this looks amazing. And then we went and saw it in the theater and like just absolutely blew our minds. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, at that point, like bullet time obviously hadn't been used before. I mean, now you can see it in pretty much everything. But
right,
that was like a really revolutionary, film technique that the Wachowskis did. And then just the story itself was really cool. Like it was it's kind of like one of those classic timeless stories. It's not quite the hero's journey of like Star Wars or anything like that, but I mean it's definitely that, okay, yeah, you have the chosen one, but it's also the what are you willing to put up with in your society, and like what are you willing to fight against to try and change. And mm-hmm. It's just I felt it was pretty close to a flawless movie.
Do you remember the first time that you like heard about it existing? Because I remember it kind of came out of nowhere. I read a lot of like Ain't It Cool News at the time, right? But like even I don't remember really it being on the radar.
I think we probably saw like some commercials on TV, right? So like that would have been maybe a month or a couple weeks before it came out. And then there's like some bus stop advertising stuff and stuff. But yeah, it was one of those things where like we knew we wanted to see it, but we didn't realize how good it was going to be.
And the whole promo, like the marketing push was just, what is the Matrix, right? Like that was just, it's just teasing this thing that they're not even really filling you in on what it is.
Yeah, and that's what makes like great movies great, is that you can go into it completely blind, and then there's this air of mystery, and then the world that gets revealed or the story that gets revealed, you're just like, wow, that's so sweet.
Yeah, and it was along with like the Blair Witch Project, a movie that we will talk about later in this podcast. It had this like really interesting use of new sort of marketing techniques at the time, and using the internet, right, as a way of marketing the film. I think there was even like a website that you could go to that was like, what is the Matrix? And then when you clicked on it, it was just like a bunch of random, like it was if I remember it right, was like the code falling and that sort of thing. And like,
right, that green screensaver thing.
Yeah. And like, that was just like, oh, cool. Okay. I guess I don't know what the Matrix is. So now I have to go find out by seeing this movie. But I do remember there being a very cool advertising campaign for it. Joey, what's you're younger. I know The Matrix is your favorite movie ever.
I think so.
And you've seen a lot of them, so that's impressive. When was the first time you saw it? I know you didn't see it in the theater, right?
Yeah, we did the math. Math is the wrong word, but I don't think I've seen any film that we're going to cover for this podcast. I don't think I saw any of them in theaters, because I was 11 and I just turned 12 at the very end of 99. So basically everything I saw after the fact. This was, I'm pretty sure, my first R-rated movie, which was very exciting. That my friend had a birthday party either in 99 or in 2000, whenever it was out on DVD, and we watched it at his house. And I was just like, whoa, this is cool. But I still like didn't really get it. And then I just kept watching it. And then eventually, for the sequels, I went with my dad to see them at midnight, both Reloaded and Revolution. So like it quickly became a thing that like I shared with him. But yeah, I watched this after the fact, and I'd seen it so many times, like I had most of it memorized. And I think the experience that you guys probably had, and John, I want to hear yours next, but that walking into a thing and not knowing what it is. When I was living in Austin and the Draft House showed all the Wachowskis movies over the course of a month, they had someone introduce the trilogy, because I saw all three back to back one day, and he was like, I know that everybody here, for the most part, and I think we even did a show of hands, like everybody in the room had seen the first one. He's like, everybody's seen this, but try to think back, try to put yourself in that theater in 1999 that you've seen these weird commercials, these weird ads, and you don't really know what this is. And like, we all know that, you know, Neo was the one and Trinity is this and blah, 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 but like, pretend that you don't. And I felt like that mindset really changed things for me. And it's kind of like, I wish that I was older. Like, I'm sort of jealous of you guys in retrospect that you were able to walk into this theater completely blind and just see this thing that like broke your brain in real time. Like, that's amazing.
In bullet time.
In bullet time.
Yeah, I think there's been two other theater experiences I've had like that. One was when my friends and I went to go see the original Blade in the theaters, and like that was amazing. Because no one expected like anything from that movie. And for us, it was just kind of like, oh, cool, you know, it's a fighty movie. It has Wesley Snipes. Let's go check it out. And then just like the sound and the action and all of it was like, this film is phenomenal. And then I was when they re-released Star Wars, the original episodes 4, 5, and 6. Got a chance to go see them in as the Irvine Spectrum. So at the time, it was like one of the biggest screens in the country. And this theater could sit. I want to say it was like 400 or 500 people. I mean, it was massive. And like you hear the intro come in, and then the Star Destroyer goes overhead, and I'd seen Star Wars before, but like actually seeing it in the theater like that was just it was so cool. But yeah, like having that experience, like it kind of sucks that a lot of kids aren't gonna get to have that experience because A, theaters are kind of dying due to the pandemic, and B, home systems are now so good where it's just like, well, I have my couch and my fridge. Like, why am I going out?
Yeah, and Star Wars itself has moved very successfully like to television, which is interesting, right? Because like they're doing these very big, very spectacular things, and yeah, they're not in the theater, right? It's really. It's a strange new world.
I've had that conversation a lot about like the death of theaters, and I feel like the worst movie experiences I've ever had have been in theaters, like people talking or texting or just being obnoxious, just generally being people, but also like the 50 best movie experiences I've ever had have all been in theaters too. So like at home, it's always like a B plus maybe, but like in a theater, it could be terrible. Like you might just ruin the movie for you, but it could also be, seeing Star Wars on the big screen, or seeing The Matrix for the first time, or seeing Blade for the first time, being like, holy, like just that communal experience. Right. So man.
It's like, well, I would say it's very similar to sports games, right? Like like being in a stadium, like with all the people, and you're reacting with each other, like to the stuff that you're seeing and witnessing in real time. And I mean, there's like for the really good films, and like The Matrix was one of those films. At least the showing I went to go see, like the audience was invested in it. Like you'd hear people like cheering or gasping or whatever. And I mean, and that's pretty cool to get the feeling like that, because there aren't very many movies that can pull that off.
John, what about you? What was your? I'm assuming you saw this in theaters.
I did, and we've talked a lot about The Matrix in different podcasts. You and I have, and we haven't really talked so much about the just experience of watching it, which is sort of why I wanted to have this conversation. And I've alluded to the fact that like I didn't actually love The Matrix the first time through. Like when it came out, I wasn't all that enamored with it, and I will tell you why, because I think that there's important context. Chris, I'm glad you brought up Blade, because that's one of the things where I was like, oh, it's kind of like Blade. I remember seeing that like a year earlier, or 2 years earlier, but somewhere in that ballpark. And that really, a lot of the stylistic sort of action sequences and just sort of aesthetic of The Matrix, I was like, yeah, this is kind of like Blade. I'd also seen the Wachowskis' other movie Bound before that, and I thought that was a really cool movie. And so I wasn't like, the whole aesthetic wasn't new to me. And then I kind of undersold what they were going for, because I felt that a lot of the first Matrix was a lot of the sort of, kind of Cartesian, like nature of existence stuff that I'd seen in like The Truman Show and Dark City, like the year before that. And I was like, kind of underwhelmed. And I also think a lot of it was like I probably saw it like 3 weeks after it came out the first time. I was in college, I was busy, and like a lot of my friends went to go see it the opening weekend. Like, it's the best thing ever, like, bro, it's blow your mind. And I was like, oh, cool, can't wait. And I guess I was kind of the victim of some hype. So I was really lukewarm about it, honestly, for quite a while, and it took until Reloaded for me to really fall in love with the whole series. And like, Joey knows that I'm a big fan of like the entire series up through the fourth one. I just love them, but I really had to kind of reevaluate it. So to me, like, my memory of The Matrix is a lot more to do with the sort of the cultural moment that it was, and this weird, like, kind of stealing the thunder from the Phantom Menace. What was supposed to be the Phantom Menace is like, it was supposed to be the only movie of that year, which is
right,
wild to think about, right? That's what I remember.
One of these movies is going to be amazing. One of them is going to be terrible. Which one do you think is which?
And I love the Phantom Menace now, for what it is, and like, it's a beautiful movie aesthetically. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just not a good movie.
yeah. There's obviously a lot of things about it. We're going to do an episode about the Phantom Menace later, so
nice.
We'll hold that thought. But yeah, to me, it was like, I didn't get it. And I definitely undersold it. There's a lot more going on there than I thought there was right in the moment. And I couldn't really pull that apart until I saw the second and third movie, which, by the way, are like the movies that completely alienated me.
So hold on. So it took you 3 or 4 years to really, for this to click into place.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I was like, it was cool, and like, it's good, and like, it's a fun action movie, and it's a good sci-fi movie, but like nothing I haven't seen before. And I was wrong, because again, the second and third movie made me realize, oh, there's a lot more that I didn't see the first time, that they're actually tricks they're pulling here. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the sort of backlash, the way this movie sort of shifted within the sort of culture it appealed to. Chris, first of all, I'm going to ask you, what's your sort of relationship to the rest of the Matrix canon?
I enjoyed watching the second and third movies. I feel like the concepts that they were going for, like they really tried to go for it, but for me, they didn't hit all the notes that they were going for. And I think one of the prime examples is the whole the speech with Colonel Sanders, aka the architect, right? Where you have this guy just full on monologuing in a room. And what he's saying is actually, it's a very interesting conversation that he's having. But the way that it's presented is kind of like, if you're not really paying attention during that conversation, you're just like, what the hell is happening right now? And so, like, I think they tried to go bigger than maybe they were capable of handling. But I can respect that, right? Like, props to them for, at least making the effort to have like a highbrow, like, intellectual conversation within a punchy sci-fi movie.
Right.
Like, and especially people expecting it to be more of just a shooty, punchy sci-fi movie with some, minor philosophical stuff embedded in it. Like, it was like, no, in the second and third ones, they really did go for it. But yeah, it felt like those maybe would have been better as like indie films, as opposed to like blockbuster films.
And they were, in a sense, right? Like, Joey, I mean, like, would you agree with that? They basically are giant indie films, right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
I think all 4 of them are like really heady indie films masquerading in $200 million. I don't know what the budget for the first one is, but I'm sure at least 2 and 3 were enormous budgets, right? That like, it's like, oh, we built this 3-mile stretch of highway in the Australian desert, but also we're going to have a scene where the architect talks at you for 8 minutes, right? Or like, there's, we developed an entire new way to shoot film that's going to revolutionize the way that everybody shoots everything, but also like, what if we're all slaves? Like, what about that? It's just like, hold on, wait, what?
Yeah, no, it was definitely like, like I said, I think they reached a little too far.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, like, and again, I'm glad you brought up the architect scene. That's the scene where I was like, oh shit, I love this, right? Because that's my jam.
It's a very smart scene. Like, it's actually a very compelling conversation. It's just packaged terribly.
Well, that's the really funny thing about John. I guess your perspective here is that, like, so many people, you're the opposite of so many people, because so many people are just like,
I know.
first movie's awesome, second and third movie, like, it lost me. I'm never gonna watch those again. It makes the first movie worse. And you're like, first movie pretty good, but the second and third movie really puts it into place. It's like, hold on, wait, what?
And then the fourth one, I'm like, oh, I'm in love.
Yeah.
Chris, have you seen Resurrections?
I did. I really liked Resurrections.
Cool.
Like for me, my personal ranking would be the first one, then Resurrections, then probably 2, then 3.
Yep, that's mine too.
And the thing I loved about Resurrections was like it wasn't afraid to go after itself and also the movie industry. It was just like that part where like at the beginning of the movie when they're talking about this game and how they can't get it made, or just the whole meta commentary on what was what Laurence Wachowski no doubt had to go through to like get this one made. It's like it, and the thing that's so good about it is that it fits the character of the movie, like the philosophical topics that are being discussed, but it's also a trenchant commentary on, look, we tried to make this thing. This is the only way we were able to make it.
Yeah. Does it work for you though, like as a Matrix movie? I think that's the thing that a lot of people are kind of divided about, that they can see that it's a great sort of achievement of art, right? That it's for all the reasons that you're saying. It's hard to look at that, and it's not lazy. It's a very thoughtful movie. But does it work as like a sequel to The Matrix, or does it make you like look at the original Matrix any differently?
It doesn't really make me look at the original any differently. And honestly, what I felt after watching Resurrections was like I liked it, but it felt like it was like a 4.5, 5 hours worth of movie that they had to tell in like 2, because it's almost like here's the greatest hits, right? And then but like a lot of what made the original one so good was like there was time for that world to breathe, like that whole Trinity escorting Neo to the party. Like there's an entire scenes where it's like it's them just kind of walking around and then going and doing stuff, and you get a feel for that world. Whereas Resurrections was kind of like, okay, we got to bounce from scene to scene to scene, and we got to get through them quick because we're telling a lot of stuff. So yeah, it felt a little condensed compared to the first one.
We're spending a lot of time talking about movies that didn't come out in 1999, but it makes me wonder, is this the movie of what, John, you and I know what we're going to cover, but also just Chris, thinking about the movies that come out that year, like, does this movie have the most lasting impact of any movie from that year? And has it spawned the most sequels? I'm struggling to come up with an answer to either of those that isn't no.
I think culturally it's definitely had the most impact. Like you can just say The Matrix and people, like most anyone you say that to will understand what you're referencing. Like it has become culturally like omnipresent. And then the ideas behind it too, I think, are also kind of as we become more of an information society, people like are seeing now really like what this movie was about. And I read, I'm a huge fan of William Gibson, Neuromancer, kind of like the Godfather of cyberpunk, and like and it feels like The Matrix was kind of very similar in terms of Neuromancer, in that it really just kind of took this world that a certain segment of the population was aware of, right? But for the most part, most people may not have been very internet savvy, or even had a clue of like, okay, what does like actual AI mean? Like what would a conflict between humans and machines look like? And it really kind of introduced them to that.
Yeah, you're right, Joey. I was just thinking about this because a couple days ago I heard someone say a glitch in the Matrix in a completely unrelated. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was like on the news, right? Someone was referring to like something that's going wrong, right?
Deja vu obviously existed for like hundreds, if not thousands, of years as a concept, but like that's the Matrix claimed ownership of that right now. It's like it's the same thing. It's like that just is now a Matrix thing. The glitch in the Matrix, the deja vu. It just wild.
Chris, how like as the years have gone on, have you revisited The Matrix a bunch of times, or not at all? Have you shown it to any of your kids?
Yeah, no, I like if it's on TV, I'll sit down and watch
Yeah.
it. You know, even if it has commercials, even though I hate commercials. But yeah, I did show it to my kids. And I think my older daughter would have been 12, my younger daughter was 10, and they liked it. They thought it was really cool. I'm not. I think they followed most of the philosophical stuff fairly well. Haven't shown them 2 or 3 yet. Not quite sure if they're prepared for that. But yeah, no, it's definitely something where it's not I have to make time to watch it like every year or something like that. But if it's on, it's one of those movies where I'll definitely tune in and watch it.
Mhm.
Does it diminish for you over time, or do you still like it as much as you did the first time?
Oh no, I still like it as much as I did the first time. Like it's for me, generally, if I like a movie, it's the same as if I like a book. Like I can go back and reread it again and
Cool,
again and
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And even if I know what's going to happen,
Right.
like it's you still enjoy the experience of it happening.
Yeah, there's something about the sort of finale that I've always loved. The fight with Smith in the subway, and the "I am Neo" moment, or "My name is Neo." Sorry, and
God damn it, fired.
sorry. And then also the sort of like the Buddha awakening scene at the end, where he like sees the Matrix and deflects the bullets and is resurrected. I mean, that stuff is I'm a sucker for all of that stuff, and I can watch the whole ending. And then of course like the final scene with the telephone booth and the Rage Against the Machine song.
Well, I mean, like I watched this again last week, and I still get chills at the "he's beginning to believe" line. It's just like I know it's coming. I have most of this memorized, both like what happens, and also like the dialogue. And that line still just like gives me chills. Like it's incredible.
I will say it's kind of funny. When my kids were watching it, we had to explain to them what a payphone was.
I do have a question related to that, sort of. It never struck me. I've probably, like, this is no joke. I know people say this, but like I've probably seen this movie 100 times. Like it's by far the movie I've seen the most. But I never thought about until last week how you call from the Matrix to like the Nebuchadnezzar. Like how do you dial a thing that's not on your plane of existence? And I made a joke on Twitter about like, do you have to hit 9 to dial out? But like I don't understand. Like it seems like it would be a different set of rules. Like it's not even just like numbers. It's just like how do you do it?
I think the underlying theme, which again is one of the really smart things about the movie, is like it's a modem, right? Like you're literally setting up this new transfer of information that before the internet was a thing. Like modems didn't exist. Like that wasn't a thing, right? And so when you're in the Matrix, that's the phone is just the representation, but this is it's essentially, if I had to break it down into technical aspects, like it would be, okay, you're asking the code to implement a specific thing, and then there's probably some backdoor somewhere where if it gets this certain code fragment, it pings a satellite relay somewhere. Nebuchadnezzar has like a tracking signal or something like that, and then that's how they get the consciousness in there, which then begs the question: how fast are their transfer rates? Because a consciousness seems to it seems like it would take up a couple petabytes.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting to me about the way the film is aged and its legacy is like there is a lot of sort of, first of all, there's a lot of really dumb things about, like, in terms of things that don't make any sense, like the idea of humans being batteries. It's like, what? Wait, that doesn't work. You can't do that because like they don't generate energy unless you put energy into them. Whatever. So there's that element, and then there's like a lot of the cringeworthy lines, especially from like Morpheus, right? That it's only because Laurence Fishburne is so badass that they even work at all. But some of them are just sort of like, what? That doesn't make sense. And yeah, the phone thing, as you say, and the the sheer amount of data that would have to travel, all of that stuff, right? But I think what's it's kind of a testament to it is that when the story is good enough, when the movie's good enough, like that stuff doesn't matter. You can actually just bypass it and embrace it. I know, Chris, like you're the only one of us who's successfully like written science fiction. So, when you have a cool idea that doesn't make logical or scientific sense, right? Like, how do you just like, are you just like, I'm just going to go for it and make it as entertaining as possible, regardless? Or like, have you run into that problem?
Yeah. So that's something where like it really, you have to walk a very fine line, because you want your, sci-fi stuff to make sense, right? Like you want people to look at it and be like, okay, yeah, I could plausibly see that happening. But at the same time, you don't want to get so bogged down in the technical details that all of a sudden your reader is reading an engineering manual for made up engineering.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, I mean, granted, there are some authors that can do that and it's pleasurable to read, but they're few and far between. And like for me personally, for the most part, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to make this logically make sense, but if there's a certain thing that needs to happen, then I'm just going to have that thing happen because at the end of the day, it's my universe. and as long as I tell a good story in it, then the landscaping is just the landscaping. And I feel like a lot of people get hung up on that, in that to write a good story, like, yeah, world building needs to be a part of it, but it's what the characters in that world do. Like your characters are so much more important than the technical details.
So I have another sort of like of the time question, because I've always been interested to explore this with people who were old enough to have like been an adult at the time, right? Or at least a late teenager when they saw it, and then sort of see the way that it's evolved. And I know like you're someone who has been an advocate for LGBTQ plus community. So I got to ask you this: like, did you get the trans stuff the first time? And if not, like, when did that kind of dawn on you? Because that took me a while to be like, oh, I had to read some essays to be like, oh, yeah, I finally see this angle. And it's incredibly obvious. It's sort of a weird thing to have missed.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not get it the first time I watched it. Like it took me a while and I'd read like, trans friendly sci-fi, LGBTQ friendly sci-fi, like where, that was just accepted as being who you are. I mean, like anyone who's read Ian Banks's culture stuff, like he goes through the whole gamut of human sexuality, like sometimes in the same person. But it's, I think it's one of those things where it needed to be done. And I'm hopeful that we're moving towards more of a society where like it's easier for people to recognize those types of stories because they understand those types of stories need to be told, rather than it having to be like, oh yeah, it took me 3 essays and 2 PhD people explaining it to me to figure it out. But then once I did, okay, yeah, I totally saw it. And so I think a big part of it is just the unfamiliarity with a lot of people in terms of just trans issues and trans rights. And again, speaking of that at the time.
Right.
I mean, it's something that we touched on the Keanu Club episode of Resurrections, like what these movies are about. I honestly think like what made me, like I think I probably heard it, but I think what really put it into perspective for me, because I didn't get that for a while. But I think honestly it was both Wachowskis transitioning and also just Jupiter Ascending kind of being like a gender flipped Matrix in a way, where I'm like, oh, it's kind of the same story. And it took a while, but I do see it. And I think it's kind of like one of the better, more important, sort of more overt almost, readings of the first movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that are so now just like mind-blowingly obvious that I feel, I don't know, just like I was so blinded to it. Like the way that, the first movie ends with the close-up on the MF at the end, like it says system failure, and then it zooms in to just show M and F right before it cuts to Neo. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, of course, also, as you say, like we sort of refer to them as being quasi indie films because they are very personal to the Wachowskis. And again, right, I think that the fact that like, they went through their own personal sort of evolution as these movies sort of told their story is one of the things that I also now like find, especially in the context of Resurrections, to be so sort of lasting about them, right? There's always a different kind of angle to look at even just the first Matrix, but like really the whole series. And I do also think that's kind of by design, right? That there's just so many different ways of understanding the story. And I find that really kind of lovely, because really what it comes down to is like this idea of fluidity and universality of identity. And like, that's I think one of the sort of beautifully kind of encapsulated concepts that we find in all three of these. I also think, for sort of lack of a better term, like this is one of the reasons why it kind of lost the bros, right? Like this was a very bro movie when it came out, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then like the bros were like, yeah, man, Reloaded's going to be rad. And they're like, oh, why is there an orgy? Like, oh, why did Colonel Sanders just lecture me for 8 minutes? And I'm like, fuck yeah, right? Because I'm weird. But yeah, I do think there's almost a weird sort of like, I don't know. I don't want to say bait and switch because that sounds bad, but I feel like the Wachowskis kind of lured people into this world, and then we're like, and we're going to tell our story now that you're here.
Yep.
And I kind of admire that, right? As kind of a cool move to pull off.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I like 2 and 3, because like I like the story that they were trying to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I think it's fantastic. It's just, again, I don't think it was executed quite as well as it needed to be.
Well, what I really appreciate about them is that there are very few directors who have like a blank check in Hollywood. And I don't even know if they do anymore, to be honest. I think that probably if we are led to believe in Resurrections, that's kind of what had to happen. It does not seem like they are respected to the way that they should be after how much money they've made Warner Brothers. But with that said, to some extent, they have a blank check. And I appreciate them because they are willing to get as weird and out there and specific and not really friendly to the masses. Like, Jupiter Ascending is real weird. Cloud Atlas is real weird. Speed Racer is real weird. And these are all movies that I love. And I think to think back to like 1999 or like even before that, like 96, where they probably wanted to make The Matrix. And they're like, well, before you do this crazy high concept thing, let's see if you can actually just make a movie first. They make Bound. They're like, okay, Bound rules. Okay, so you can have a green light to do this thing. But I like that they're financially successful enough that they keep getting to make movies, but they're like, we're going to make the movies that we want to make and not the movies that the masses necessarily want either. Like, and if you don't connect with it, that's fine. But this is the story that we want to tell. And it, I hope you enjoy, but if you don't, there's plenty of other movies.
Right. And I think that's what, like, whether you hit or miss, that's how you tell a great story, is you have to be willing to commit to your vision. Like, and I feel it can be very hard to do that in an industry like Hollywood, right? Where you need to get, 15 different suits to sign off on something. And who knows if they care about the story you're trying to tell. Like, right. For them, it's just dollars at the end of the day. Like, will this make us more money? And so that's why I think, you're right when you said earlier that all of these are indie films. Like, these are not your typical blockbuster Hollywood films at all. The first one just happened to be that.
Right. Christy, are you a fan of any of the other Wachowski, like Cloud Atlas or Speed Racer or any of the others in the canon?
I thought Speed Racer was visually really cool. Yeah. Not really sure it made a lot of sense, but visually it's amazing. Like, props to the vision, yeah. and for realizing it. I haven't seen Cloud Atlas. I heard about it, and then I've been meaning to see Jupiter Ascending for a long time, and somehow I just haven't gotten around to it. Like, I probably because I heard it got a lot of like really mixed reviews when it came out. And so then I was like, oh, well, I can watch it some other time. And yeah, I should get around.
And then life happened. Yeah, no, I hear you.
Right. Exactly.
Joey will tell you all about how great all those movies are.
And also Sense8, their TV show on Netflix, is awesome too.
I did watch Sense8. I thought Sense8 was really cool.
Before we go, I have I dug this up and I found this pretty fascinating. Do you, Chris, do you remember seeing the Super Bowl ad for The Matrix?
No, I don't.
I vaguely remember this, and as I recall, it was a very short teaser that featured Trinity sort of swinging away from the exploding building, right? That like very cool shot
where she crashes like into the camera,
right? Where the helicopter,
yeah, it's a helicopter, and then like the glass ripples and everything,
right? And I remember that being featured. Here's something I don't remember. So I found this from the February 1st, 1999 Chicago Tribune. It is a review of that year's Super Bowl, which apparently was very boring. I guess the Denver Broncos beat the Atlanta Falcons, and it was 34-19.
Oh wait, that wasn't the middle of these 7 Vikings Super Bowl wins in a row?
No, not during the great.
Are you in the Matrix?
The great Viking dynasty of the late 90s.
No, actually, honestly, if we're in January, February '99, that's the year that the Vikings drafted Randy Moss and won 15-1 and broke my heart for the very first time. So that's actually a very impactful personal Super Bowl to me in that regard. So okay,
well, and I know that you're a Vikings fan because you said for the first time.
Oh yeah, it's been nothing but heartbreak, as you know. As you're well aware.
Welcome to the club.
So here's a paragraph from this review of the Super Bowl, which is I should say, negative review of the Super Bowl. It says the following: Fox broadcasting the game and earning what is claimed to be a record more than $50,000 per second for its ad time, or $1.6 million per 30 seconds, seem to tacitly acknowledge that the ads have grown as important as the game itself to many viewers. In the second quarter, Fox got caught coming out of one ad for a befuddling movie called The Matrix after the start of a play in which Denver quarterback John Elway threw a long touchdown pass. Viewers saw the denouement, a heartbreaking moment for Atlanta, but not the snap that started it. So the 30-second Matrix ad got in the way of a John Elway touchdown pass.
Honestly, the ad was probably better.
I'm sure it was, and the Chicago Tribune referred to it as a befuddling movie. So, this was several months before it came out, and I guess they were like, what? So there you go. That's it.
Yeah, that sounds about
right. Anyway, that I thought the NFL and Matrix connection was a fun one to kind of end on. Before we go, Chris, do you have any other movie of the 1999 canon that you absolutely love that you would like to profess your love for?
So I'm gonna have to say, actually, The Mummy.
Yes.
And the reason why is okay. No joke. It was on. My wife had it on TV on Saturday, and so we forced our kids to come and sit down and watch it. We're like, you need to watch this movie because Brendan Fraser is just such a criminally underrated actor.
Hell yeah!
Like, he's so good at what he does, and he's always kind of typecast as this the goofable, the goofy doofus, but like he's so good, and it really hit me when I was watching it over the weekend is that like they don't really make movies like that anymore.
Yeah.
The feel of The Mummy is the feel of like a classic 1930s 1940s adventure movie, and like from the score to the setting of the shots, like it is a type of movie you don't see anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really well done. Especially when you consider like the material that it's based on is, it's a mummy. I was cracking my kids up because I started calling the mummy the sand vampire as the movie was going on. It's because he basically is.
Yeah. Well, and Joey's never seen it, so that's going to be a fun episode.
You got to watch it.
Yeah, he will. Oh, he's going to have to. It's going to be part of his requirement for the show. It's funny because that movie, you're right, it's so weird, especially in the context of this particular year, because that year was a year where it was so cutting edge and movies were changing dramatically, and it is the most like just immersive throwback, like indulgent, just campy, over the top, like Indiana Jones with like no pretension whatsoever. Right? It's fantastic.
It's just a fun movie. It wants to have fun.
It's revolutionary in like how old timey it is, which is what I love about it. And yeah, we absolutely stand Brendan Fraser on this and every other podcast. He is the goddamn best.
Yeah, it's his physical comedy, like his physical skills is amazing. Yeah. And again, he doesn't get enough credit for it. Like, he's so good.
Agreed.
And then favorite movie of all time?
All right, favorite movie of all time. The original Dune.
Wow.
And I realize it is a terrible movie, but I love that movie so much.
All right, so what did you think of the new one?
I loved it. It was I cannot wait for the second one.
Cool.
It feels like they got everything that like makes Dune, and they brought it into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Although I will say, if I don't get to see Josh Brolin carrying a pug while shouting "Release the atomics," I'm gonna be super pissed because if he's gonna be Gurney, I need to see some releasing the atomics with a pug.
And it's an interesting, I mean, just to close this out, that's an interesting place to end it, because I one of the things I remember when I went to go see Dune was thinking like, yeah, this is the kind of movie that the Matrix helped make possible, right? Like there's a sort of there's a sort of aesthetic and delivery to the way this movie is made, and the way that like just Denis Villeneuve makes his movies in general, that like you see the Matrix DNA, right, in a movie like that.
Right. It's allowing sci-fi to be more grand and spectacle without going full space opera like Star Wars.
Right.
Like it's allowing them to tell a bigger story, because if you think about it, a lot of sci-fi films, like the concepts maybe, pretty highbrow or pretty out there, but in terms of the actual film itself, like not a lot of that actually gets shown. Whereas the new Dune, like they brought that world to life. It was fantastic. I kept telling my kids, just wait till you see a worm show up. Just wait for the worm to show up.
Well, good choices all around. That brings us to the end. Chris, it's been fun. Is there anything you would like to promote before we sign off?
If you like sci-fi, I wrote a book. It's called Otaku. I got a blurb from William Gibson, who liked it, so that really kind of made my day. So if you like sci-fi, please check it out.
And I have read it, and it's good. Joey, any closing thoughts?
No, I think this is a great episode to start, because again, like you said, this is maybe my favorite movie. I think it's probably my favorite movie from 1999 easily, although maybe not. We got a couple coming up that I'm really excited about, but I'm glad that we got to talk about it with Chris. And yeah, something, there is no spoon.
It's all downhill from here for Joey. We've just covered the only movie he's going to love. And,
I'm going to retire on top of my game.
Just like Tom Brady. No, like Tom Brady, we also will be back in this time in 2 weeks. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Joey. And we will catch you next time.